All right, so I'm just gonna describe a little bit more about uh like when in 2013, like my thought processes. My grandpa would just say I was expressing dualistic software. I saw myself as Jewish and I had a predator prey orientation toward white people, but I'll kind of describe how I analyzed the Bible in a way that kind of reflected my orientation. So I'll just give I'll just say this. Like, I was a big fan of Lil B, right? And Lil B was a rapper, a black guy, and he basically would call himself base God. He called himself God, so he's mocking religion, and I like that because I always saw religion as white supremacist, and I wanted to believe that religion was just Freudian. It was just delusions from the unconscious, because I wanted to dismantle and uproot religion. So it's just illusions. It's Freudian and Marxist. I wanted to believe that people just that and Nietzschean, even that it just comes about because of genetic Darwinian tendencies in humans to want to even what's his name, the dude's name, it's not Derrida, but it's he's a famous sociologist, Durkheim says that, like, back in the ancient times, people would worship a totem, but the totem was really just a reflection of the tribe. And I thought that religion was just a way to consolidate power within certain groups, like Nietzsche would say, the priestly classes, and so that they can maintain power within their genetic lines and also maintain power within their genetic groups. And the god was a way to maintain the tribe and maintain the genetics of the tribe and everything. And that's why different tribal or ethnic groups adopt different religions. So I wanted to believe this. I wanted to believe that religion was just hocus pocus. But really, deep down, what I wanted to dismantle religion, completely uproot it, because I saw it as white supremacist. I saw it as maintaining the status quo. And I was a Marxist Freudian. And I wanted to just completely obliterate it because I wanted to beat the white race. So I'll just kind of describe my analyses of the Bible that I tried to use, because I wanted to prove that the Bible was itself communist and anti-white. So, like I said, I was a fan of Lil B, and Lil B was a rapper, and he's like making fun of religion, and he calls himself base God. He calls himself God. He's a black guy, right? So he's basically a Shiva worshiper. The Shiva worshippers were Dravidians, and they saw themselves as God. And now my grandpa would say there's a higher aspiration than that. He would say, yes, you are God, but in the sense of a wave in the ocean. The ocean is God. You are a wave in the ocean. So you aren't necessarily God, but you are a wave. But anyways, so even the Shiva worshippers, there's a higher aspiration, my grandpa would say, in their beliefs. There's a spiritual quality to it, even if they do have, quote unquote, like, even if they are expressing dualistic software. Like my grandpa would say, in a sense, if someone says, I am God, there's truth to that. But if it's a belief, then it's not the flow. The flow is transcendence of belief. So, but anyways, so Lil B he'd mock religion, right? And he'd act all sentimental, and he'd make fun of religion. And my grandpa would say, yes, there's a truth to that. That's what the Shiva worshipers, what they have against the Vishnu worshipers is they say, yeah, a lot of these quote unquote religious good people, they aren't really authentic. They aren't really in the flow. They themselves have, so they basically would be like Nietzsche followers, Marxist Freudians, and they would basically look down upon religion. But a lot of them have valid points. A lot of religious people aren't authentic. Okay, but I saw religion as white supremacist, so I wanted to uproot it. So, like, one way that I looked at it was like King David. King David, according to rabbis, he was half Philistine. Like, his dad was Philistine, and he was one of the first kings of Israel. And I wanted to think, like, yeah, well, God didn't like the kings, because I remember the Orthodox Jews, they wanted a king. They wanted Messiah to be a king. And they wanted Messiah to be like King David. And I didn't like the idea of kings, because I thought that the Orthodox Jews were just white supremacists. And of course they want a king because they want authoritarianism, which I thought would be good for the white race. But I like democracy, because I thought democracy was better for race mixing. So I wanted to think that the Bible was subtly putting down King David and pointing to democracy being the best way to be. Now, my grandpa would also say that he likes democracy, but for a different reason, because my grandpa would say democracy is more conducive to the flow. But I didn't understand the flow at this time. So I like democracy. And like when it would talk about King David, it said David did a lot of bad things, right? He killed people, and he did some bad things, right? He killed like Bathsheba's husband and stuff like that. But remember, I was a leftist. I was a communist leftist, and everything I saw was anti-white. So I attributed all the bad things David did to his white side. And I saw the kingly lines of Israel as descending from King David. And, God said that he didn't want kings because he said the kings would exploit them. And again, I was a communist. So I was like, yeah, of course the kings will exploit. Everybody should be, there should be no kings. It should be communism, and everybody should share. And, that's what the Bible really taught. And, according to Finkelstein, the Bible really came from, Canaanite serfs who created egalitarian societies. So having a king, that's not good. So I was more for democracy, more for communism, though, especially more for communism. And I didn't, and I wanted to think that, like King David, all the bad stuff he did and all the bad things that the kings did after him were probably because of that Philistine strain. And the Philistines, I saw them as white, as Indo-Europeans. And so everything I wanted to see was anti-white. And even I went so far as, the story of Job. In the story of Job, Job is an Edomite. And his line apparently descends from a line of the Edomites married with the Hittites. And I don't know if this is actually true, but scholars say that the Hittites are Indo-Europeans. I don't know what the Bible actually says, but scholars say. Now, again, we don't know if what scholars say is true. You always have to question stuff, but scholars say that the Hittites are Indo-Europeans, and I wanted to think of the story of Job as actually, again, Job believes in God, and I was like, see, belief is not good. Belief is not the flow, and that's why God destroys him, because he believes. And I was like, and see, the same thing with the Roman Empire. You remember the Roman centurion who believed in Jesus? It says he believed that Jesus was God. Well, Gibbons points out that the Roman Empire was destroyed after that, but the Jews were saved. And I wanted to believe that it was just because the Jews got the Romans to believe in Christianity, which was designed to save the Jews and also designed to undermine their society and subvert their society and destroy them. So I was like, see, they believe, but belief is not the flow. Now the Jews, they don't believe. It never says the Jews believe in the Bible. They always don't believe. It's always like Job, who's an Edomite. He believes, but the Jews never believe. So I'm like, see, but who's the chosen people? The Jews, because they don't believe, in belief is closer to the flow. Because if you believe, you're in conformity, and conformity is not the flow. It's like basketball. If you shoot the way the coach says, you're not going to be in the flow. But also if you're not conforming, you're not going to be in the flow either. But as my grandpa said, non-conformity could be closer to the flow, though, because at least you get yourself in trouble. Whereas if you're just always in conformity, you'll have social approbation and you'll never get yourself in trouble. So I wanted to basically undermine even the book of Job and be like, see, he believed, and that's why he was destroyed. That's why God destroyed him. Just like, and then if you look at the other parts of the Bible, like the Pharaoh, he believes he's a Gentile, and I wanted to believe that he was an Indo-European too, and he's destroyed. He believes, but he's killed. But the Jews who don't believe, they're saved. Or, like the Jews don't believe, but then they put the snake up on the stick and then they're saved. And I was saying that all this is because belief is not the flow. And the Jews who don't believe, at least they're in nonconformity so they can get closer to the flow and knowing, which is the truth, which is transcendence of the body. And that's why, and the way I looked at that too was Abraham, he's sinning. So, and never mind. But my point is, there were sacrifices. There's always sacrifices. Like Jesus was sacrificed, or the other sacrifices that occur, like the snake sacrificed on the pole. And the sacrifice leads to the salvation, but the sacrifice, I would say, is the death. That represents the death of the ego to the flow, which is knowing. But I would say the belief, the Indo-Europeans who believed, they never got in the flow. So I was like, see, everything I did was oriented toward being anti-Indo-European and wanting to destroy the white race and mix the white race. So my grandpa would say I was expressing dualistic software. Now,
Time is spent.
So I want to be like, yeah, but see, Job is an Edomite, and he's probably mixed with the Hittites, and that's why, he's Indo-European actually, and that's why he was destroyed by God, because he believed, but it's like the Jews who got the Ninevites to believe, but they end up being destroyed, or the Jews who got the Romans to believe, because I want to destroy Christianity. They got the Romans to believe in Christianity, but they end up being destroyed because belief is not the flow. But the Jews who don't believe, they get in the flow. So that's why they're the chosen people. And even Paul says that the Jews will all be saved, but the Gentiles who get grafted in, they might not be saved. So you see, it's all a trick. So I want to just undermine and destroy Christianity. So I want to see like the Edomites or like Job, he was really destroyed. And then, but it says at the very end, and this kind of destroyed my theory, but it says at the very end that Job ends up with more, even though he got everything taken from him, he ended up with more than he started with because God ended up blessing him. But I wanted to be like, yeah, well, he blessed him because he ended up accepting communism, probably. And when there's communism, everybody shares. And I wanted to believe that the story of Jesus was just a metaphor of communism. Like when he multiplies bread, that was just him getting everybody to share after the metaphorical destruction of the Roman Empire by because the pigs, or Jesus crosses the sea and then he gets the pigs to be swallowed by the water, and then Jesus multiplies bread. And I was like, that was a metaphor of destruction of the Roman Empire, destruction of the Indo-Europeans. And then after the destruction of the Indo-Europeans, then we can get communism and everybody sharing. And then you get abundance. And that's what happened with Job. He believed in God, and I wanted to believe God was a communist. And because he believed in communism, then he got abundance. So everything I did, everything, my whole orientation was toward, I saw myself as a Jew and I wanted to destroy the white race, and I was pro-communism, pro-Marxism. And because I always saw the white people as Nazis, because I wanted, because the white people would be like, the Jews are communists and stuff. And I wanted to embody that, So I went through the whole Bible and I basically made a Marxist communist interpretation of the Bible, and even wanted to say like that the Bible's about not believing in God, because belief is not the flow. And you don't want to believe, but you want to get into the flow, which is knowing, which is transcending belief, which is transcending the illusion of the separate self, the illusion that there is a self, the illusion of separate things. So everything, but at the time I didn't really understand my grandpa's teachings about that, but I just basically wanted to undermine Christianity and destroy the white race. So it's crazy, but so I had that predator-prey orientation. But so I'll get more into what some of the things my grandpa taught me, and what kind of, so I was looking at it through a Darwinian lens. Like I wanted to believe that there's the Jewish genes and then there's the white people genes, and there's a war going on. But these are some of the things. So I'll get to like some of the things that my grandpa taught me that ended up getting me to kind of break free of that. So one thing my grandpa taught me was that like gratitude is good. Right, because my grandpa said that gratitude is close to the flow. Because my grandpa would say, if you're in the flow, you're grateful, you're open, right? So, like I asked my grandpa one time, I was reading this thing about Muhammad, blessed peace be upon him, and Muhammad said that, one thing that you could do is you could look at people below you, and that can give you and that can give you a sense of gratitude. And my grandpa's like, yeah, and it can make you feel better about yourself. My grandpa was like, but I was like, isn't that superior or inferior software, grandpa? Because I wanted to look down upon that, because I didn't even like the idea of gratitude, and I'll get to that. But my grandpa's like, no. That's beneficial that you look down upon people below you, because it can give you a sense of gratitude, and gratitude can get you in the flow. It can enliven you, it can open you. And, being grateful as opposed to being depressed, which is more self-confirmatory. But I wanted to be like, but grandpa, isn't, being, because there's a black guy, right? There's this black rapper, and he had this rap album called like Bad Vibes Only. And he's like, no, I don't want to be grateful. I want to be angry. And that's the way I liked it. I was like, yeah, be a Marxist, be angry at the system, be an activist, don't be grateful. Like being gratitude, that's just a way for the status quo to be maintained. Because even if you don't, because my grandpa be like, yeah, be grateful no matter what. Just always look at someone below you and you could always be great. But I'm like, dude, that's just a way to maintain the status quo. People shouldn't be grateful. People should try and, what about the black people who are suffering? They shouldn't be grateful. That's just going to maintain the status quo. They should be revolting. And that's the way that I wanted to see it, because I was a Marxist. So I'm like, I like the like Bad Vibes Only song, or like, Lil B's music, where he's basically making fun of people who are like sentimental and like, oh, I'm grateful, everything is wonderful. And I'm like, no, dude, you gotta fight the system. You gotta break, I was a Marxist. So, but my grandpa's teaching me, no, being grateful is closer to the flow than, bad vibes and stuff, right? So my grandpa's teaching me this stuff. And if I wanted to believe in Darwinism, and I wanted to believe like yeah, there's Darwinian, the reason why different ethnic groups adopt different religions is because it's Darwinian. What really explains human behavior is Darwinism. Even though I knew that evolution wasn't true because of the quadrant model, I still wanted to believe because, as the Hindus say, like Krishna makes, even though we're in a matrix, it can still function under the laws of like Darwinism, because Krishna gives the materialists and the spiritual people a way to, I wanted to believe that the two extremes could both be simultaneous true, right? Even though it's all an illusion, right? But regardless, I wanted to believe in Darwinism because I was like, what explains the way that humans behave? I thought Darwinism explained it. So like I asked my grandpa, I was like, Grandpa, according to studies, and my grandpa didn't necessarily believe the studies. Again, do we believe the studies? But I was like, Grandpa, according to studies, women, when they have sex and they look at a man's face, if the face is more symmetrical, they're more likely to orgasm and they're more likely to conceive. I was like, how do you explain that other than Darwinism? Because if the man has a symmetrical face, it means he has better genes, and then they're more likely to have sons with better genes that are more likely to reproduce. And my grandpa was like, see, my grandpa was breaking me out of the materialist conceptions. So my grandpa told me no. He didn't say no, because again, that's dualistic probably, but he didn't say no, but in a sense he said no. He said, the reason why, in his perception of why the woman orgasms more, is because orgasm represents more of being open. And a symmetrical face represents more of the flow. Symmetry is an aspect of the flow. And my grandpa said, therefore, she's more likely to conceive because she's more likely in the flow. And even like the story of Sarah, where Sarah laughs, that God says she doesn't expect to get pregnant, but then God says she's going to get pregnant. And I guess she gets opened and she laughs and then she gets pregnant. But anyways, because the symmetry it makes her the more into the flow. And my grandpa would say the flow is what creates the conception. And my grandpa he would say it's not a part of Darwinism. It's part of the anti-entropic rewarding function, where, the more synergistic, because things become progressively more synergistic. And my grandpa even talked about Martin Luther King said that like the arc of the universe bends toward justice, and my grandpa thought there was like an innate or inherent complexification aspect of reality that's ultimately leading toward the omega point, like kingdom of heaven, right, type of thing. But it's not like a kingdom of heaven. It's like it's the next stage of evolution, right? But anyways, so okay, but then I still wanted to believe in the Darwinian idea. So I asked my grandpa, like, what was another thing I asked him? It was so like why do people orgasm? Oh, I asked him like, okay, why do girls like bad boys? And I wanted to believe the Darwinian idea, right? And the Darwinian idea is because bad boys, they have more sociopathic qualities, which can, makes them maybe better hunters and better killers, and that can help protect the children. They don't want too sociopathic, but they want, like what Peterson says, right? They want sort of sociopathic, but not too sociopathic. But they want to have someone who could protect them and who can kill and protect their family and stuff like that. So they want bad boys, but my grandpa said no. My grandpa, because I was looking at a Darwinian explanation, and then they can have sons that have those qualities that will also reproduce more. But my grandpa's like, no, it's not about genes, because I wanted to see things through the materialistic lens, the Darwinian lens, because like I said, I wanted to believe that humans came from Africa, and it's just, everyone else is just inbreds. And this is an Afrocentric idea, right? But I wanted to believe the scientific naturalistic, because I thought that the spiritual ones were white supremacist. But my grandpa's like, no. My grandpa said the reason why the woman likes the bad boys is because, again, like in his view, it's because being good is not necessarily being good. Like someone could be good because he wants to, he could be nice to the girl, but he's a nice guy, but he really wants to just have sex. He's not really in the flow. He hasn't really transcended himself. But a bad boy, at least, he's not trying to be good, and he's not in conformity, and that can sometimes get you closer to the flow, to not be in conformity. So again, my grandpa would always bring things back to the flow, but he was trying to break me out of my, my Darwinian ideas. But now I know when I see things in Darwinian fashion, then I can see myself as an animal, and I can act in that way. I can act like an animal, and I can justify it. But my grandpa was trying to break me free of that, to see everything as energy and everything as one, and break me more into a spiritual orientation. That I'm not an animal, and then I don't have justification, but I'll get to that.